Give the master bedroom to us, and you can sleep in the basement tonight." My son said it so lightly, right as he rolled his suitcase through the door. Behind him, my daughter-in-law glided past me in dark sunglasses with that appraising look like someone touring a house she's about to buy. They brought 4 suitcases, a box with an electric cooktop, a few potted plants, and the familiar line, "We'll just stay for a bit. Don't worry." I stood frozen in the living room, the place that used to be the nest for me and Evan, watching them touch and rearrange my late husband's things. My heart went cold, but my lips still held a smile. Under my hem, my fingers gripped the safe key. They thought I was a compliant old woman who would bow my head and accept it. They didn't know I had quietly installed cameras. And the one who would leave this house in shame would not be me. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Claudia Hart, 66, living in a quiet suburb of Asheville, North Carolina. 6 years ago, my husband Evan died of a heart attack while tending the backyard garden. He left me just enough life insurance, plus the savings I'd put away over 30 years working part-time at a fabric shop called Cotton and Thread. I used all of it to buy this house, the first home ever in my name alone. I didn't choose it for luxury. I chose it because it felt like Evan. In late afternoon light, the warm wood tone pours across the living room. The small, tidy kitchen has a hook for the floral apron he once gave me. Every brick, every wall is the result of years I lived carefully and decently. And in 6 years of widowhood, I learned to enjoy being alone without feeling lonely. In the mornings, I walk with a small neighborhood group, 5 women in their 60s and 70s. We talk about everything, new TV shows to the apple pie someone's husband used to love. I learned to use a smartphone, set up WhatsApp, Facebook, then Instagram, where I post photos of the rose, garden out back in bloom. Every 2 weeks, I go to a little salon on Main Street to keep my hair a chestnut brown. The color, Evan said, made me look like autumn smiling. I thought my life had settled back into a calm rhythm. Until that afternoon, when the door opened and Dylan walked in with Harper. Dylan, my only son, 35, used to be gentle and sweet, but life wore that down. After Evan died, he started changing, calling less, visiting less, and whenever he did, it was to borrow money. I could never turn him down. A mother, even knowing her child isn't perfect, keeps believing he's just going through a rough patch. But this time was different. He didn't bring the usual awkwardness. He brought the unnerving ease of someone who had a plan. Harper followed, her heels striking the wood floor with firm, even steps. She didn't look at me like a mother-in-law. She looked at me like an asset to be evaluated. "Oh, Claudia, this house has so much potential," she said, opening doors, glancing at the walls and ceiling, then stopping at the old Tiffany lamp what Evan and I bought on our 30th anniversary trip. "If we switch to LED and change the metal frame, it'll look much brighter." Claudia, she didn't call me Mom, not even Mrs. Hart. Just Claudia, a stranger's name in my own house. I swallowed and smiled. "You must be tired. I'll set up the living room so you can rest a while." "No need," Dylan cut in, voice firm. "We'll take the master. It's bigger and closer to the bathroom. You can stay in the basement for a few days." I heard my own thoughts shout. The basement? The room where Evan kept garden tools cold and damp? But I said nothing. I nodded, the reflex of someone far too used to giving way. That night, after they shut the master bedroom door, I sat in the kitchen, listening only to the vent fan and the slow clink of a spoon in my chamomile tea. I tried not to listen, but I heard Harper's laugh, Dylan's voice. "Yeah, I know. The place is old, but a few updates and it'll sell for a good price. We need to talk her into it, or at least get her to sign a few papers to make things easier later." Then they laughed. I sat still, gripping the cup until the heat was gone. The next morning, I went on my walk as usual. Maeve, my closest friend, took one look at me and asked, "You look worn out. What happened?" I told her everything, how Dylan and Harper had suddenly moved in, how they acted like homeowners, and that line about, "You take the basement." Maeve stopped, studied me, then said, "Claudia, that house is yours. You worked your whole life for it. No one has the right to walk in without permission. Don't let kindness blur your judgment." I nodded, but deep down I felt something heavier than fear, the sadness of a mother losing authority over her own life. When I got back, the living room was different. The cream sofa I bought during a spring sale had been pushed to the opposite wall. The floral pillows I loved because they matched my garden roses were tossed in a corner. The wedding photo of Evan and me taken in a field of tulips in Seattle had been taken down and replaced by a gray-black abstract print. "What do you think?" Harper asked brightly. "Much more modern, right?" I looked around the room where Evan and I drank tea every evening. Now it felt cold and unfamiliar. I answered softly, "Yes, it's modern." Harper all but took over the kitchen. She moved all my dishes to the highest shelves, then brought in a flood of organic items, expensive olive oil, cold-pressed juices, imported cheeses arranged like a model condo in a magazine. Whenever I started to cook, she'd appear with a smile. "I've got it, Claudia. You've cooked your whole life. It's time to rest." It sounded caring, but the tone was erasing me. Dylan was different. He lay on the sofa all day, scrolling his phone, sometimes heading out without saying where. When I asked about work, he just said, "Don't worry, I'm waiting on a few calls." But I knew it had been more than 8 months since he left the construction company. I didn't want to keep score, but after 3 weeks my bank balance was dropping fast. Grocery bills doubled and Harper borrowed my card to place online orders. I realized I was paying for things that weren't mine. One evening, standing in my bedroom, I looked out the window. A warm glow from the master bedroom fell across the lawn, and I heard the soft laughter of 2 young people making calculations. I opened my cabinet and took out a small wooden box. Inside were the deed, Evan's will, and old savings books. Everything was still there. I closed the lid, placed my hand on top, and breathed in. In that moment I knew. If I stayed silent, they would take everything. Not just the house, but my self-respect and the rest of my life. The next morning I went to the electronics store near Walmart and bought 2 mini cameras, thumb-sized, Wi-Fi, viewable on my phone. The clerk kindly showed me how to use them, assuming I wanted to protect against burglars. He didn't know the burglars were already inside. That night, I installed one behind a Mexican ceramic vase in the living room, angled toward the kitchen. I opened my phone and saw a crisp image, catching even the smallest movement. I felt something strange, pain and clarity at once. I told myself, watch first, talk later. I was no longer the shaky woman after Evan died. I'd rebuilt a life once. I could do it again this time to protect what I made with my own 2 hands. Outside, evening settled. Light touched the window frame, washing the wedding photo I had rehung in amber. Evan was still smiling. I whispered, "It's okay, love. I'll keep this house safe." And as the night closed in, the tiny camera began to record. The real story had only just begun. The first camera I placed behind the Mexican vase on the cabinet, right at the living room corner. From there, the thumb-size lens could see almost the entire room, even the kitchen where Harper moved in and out like it was her private domain. I kept the second camera in a drawer, waiting for the right spot. I wasn't in a hurry. I knew this game needed time. On day 1 after installing it, I sat on my bed and opened the app. The screen showed Harper with a tape measure, checking the curtains. She said casually, "These curtains are outdated. We should switch to automatic ones with a remote. It'll look more upscale." Dylan stood beside her, jotting notes in a small notebook, nodding like a tech assistant. "Yeah, the house will definitely look brighter." he said, oblivious to whose house it was. I sat there watching, a chill running down my spine. Every small laugh from Harper, every touch of her hand on the walls and frames, felt like they were peeling the warmth off. This place, layer by layer. From that day, Harper started what she called a kitchen restructuring. I called it something else, erasing me. She moved my things to the highest shelves, places I couldn't reach, even on tiptoe. She called the soft green ceramic bowls Evan bought at a local market outdated in their place, cold, plain white plates. Whenever I walked in to cook, Harper appeared right away, voice sweet but directive. "I'll do it, Claudia. You should rest. You've cooked your whole life. Now I'll take care of you." It sounded polite, but her eyes scanned knives and fridge shelves like an inventory. One morning, I set out to make my usual banana bread. I opened the cabinet and froze flour, eggs, milk, all gone. In their place were cold-pressed juices, imported cheeses, almond milk, and pricey granola. I asked, "Harper, where did you put my things?" She shrugged, smiling lightly. I tidied up. "Old stuff isn't great for your health, Claudia." For the first time ever, I felt like a guest in my own kitchen. The weekly grocery emails kept climbing, from $80 to $100 to $270. I knew I wasn't the one spending like that. But when I asked, Dylan would say, "Don't worry. Harper knows how to balance a budget." One evening I opened the fridge. Amid the fancy cheeses and detox juices sat a bag of bread I'd bought the week before, covered in green mold. I picked it up, stared at the fuzz on the crust, and felt my throat tighten. I set it down and sat at the table where Evan used to read the paper each morning, and cried quietly. Not from hunger, but from being cut out of the picture of my own life. About a week later, I checked the camera again. The feed was clear, Harper on the sofa, phone to her ear. Her voice came through the tiny speaker. "I'm serious. This area's values are rising fast. If we list at the right time, we can get over 300,000. My mother-in-law won't live forever. This house will be ours sooner or later." I saw Dylan walk by and ask, "Lo, what if Mom finds out?" Harper chuckled. "Let me handle it. We just need her to sign a few information updates." I felt my heart pound, not from fear, but awakening. I hit save, time-stamped the clip, and moved it to a special folder. On my table, the note Maeve had me stick up was still there. Record everything. Don't trust promises, trust proof. I numbered each file and wrote a caption. Harper, talking about listing the house June 12th. For the first time in days, I felt strangely calm. That night, sitting by the Tiffany lamp, I thought of Evan. He used to say, "A home holds your spirit, Claudie. Keep it clean, not just with polish, but with self-respect." I looked at the brown leather armchair where he always read the paper, the armrest darkened by 40 years of his hand. I laid my palm there, the leather cool, the memory warm. I knew if Evan were here, he wouldn't let anyone touch this house with that attitude. But I also knew he'd want me to fight wisely, not with rage, but with reason. The next day, I reopened the materials from an elder rights and homeownership community class I'd taken last year. Among the instructors was Talia Chen, a young attorney who spoke clearly and had a smile that made you trust her. I found her card again. The number was still in my wallet. That afternoon I called, "Talia, this is Claudia Hart. We met in the elder rights class. I think I need your advice." Her voice was steady and warm. "Yes, Miss Hart. Could you come to my office tomorrow morning? I'll review your house documents." The next morning I drove Evan's old gray Subaru, nearly 20 years old, downtown to Talia's office. She greeted me with a warm smile and a cup of tea. "Did you bring the house papers?" she asked. I opened my bag and pulled out an old folder. Deed, purchase, contract, insurance receipts, Evan's will. Talia read each page, sometimes jotting notes. When she finished, she looked up and said firmly, "You are the sole legal owner. No one can remove you from this home without your consent, and right now, you haven't signed any power of attorney or transfer documents. That means you retain full control." I nodded, feeling a little lighter, but Talia wasn't done. She added, "However, you need to secure your documents right away. I recommend you photograph everything and give a copy to someone you trust. Also, change your email and bank passwords and check whether anyone has been added as a beneficiary." I wrote down every line. Talia looked at me and asked quietly, "Are they living with you now?" "Yes," I said. "My son and his wife." Her eyes dimmed slightly. "Then I want you to gather more proof of intent to take over texts, calls, recordings. If they stay and show possession or coercion, you can request a lawful plot eviction order." I asked, "What if they refuse to leave?" Talia said, "You're not alone, Miss Hart. The law protects you, but we need evidence." Driving home, I turned on the radio. "Blue Moon of Kentucky" came on Evan's song whenever he fixed the fence. I smiled. Talia's words lingered, "You're not alone." That afternoon, I got home and found Harper taping color samples to the wall. Dylan was browsing real estate sites. Harper turned, smiling. "I'm drafting a plan to redo the living room, Claudia. I want to make this an open space like the model homes in Charlotte." I smiled, hiding my real expression behind my cup of tea. "Sounds ambitious." That night, I went to my room and shut the door. On my phone, Harper was still on-screen tape measure in hand, lips moving, the mic too far to catch it all. I tapped record. From that moment, I understood. I had officially entered the fight to take back my home. Light from the Tiffany lamp reflected across the wall, laying a soft gold on my face. I touched Evan's photo frame and murmured, "Love, I'm keeping my promise. They haven't won." And in the quiet, the house seemed to listen. Only the tiny camera blinked steady, small like the first spark of justice. I didn't need many days to see Harper wasn't just updating the house. She was setting up a deal. That morning, I'd just made chamomile tea when the front door opened. Harper came in with a polished smile. "Claudia, I have a friend dropping by to take a look at a few details just for reference." I glanced at her spotless heels. This wasn't a casual visit. A moment later, the doorbell rang. A young man with gelled hair, crisp white shirt, leather briefcase stepped in. Harper beamed. "This is Colin, a real estate agent, an old classmate. He knows this area well and wants to help estimate the value of Mom's house." My heart went cold. "Mom's house, not my house." She said estimate like a breeze, but I knew when an agent walks in, they've already considered a sale. I stood in the kitchen doorway, watching through the crack. Harper poured coffee using the commemorative porcelain set Evan gave me for my 40th birthday, a set I never let anyone touch. She set the tray down, turning her back to the camera hidden behind the vase. Colin sat and opened his tablet, voice upbeat. "This place has great potential. With this square footage, if you update the interiors, change the floors, repaint, you're looking at $310,000 to $330,000, depending on timing." Harper tilted her head, sugar sweet. "What if we change the door frames and add automatic shades?" Colin nodded. "Tack on a few thousand and you're set. South Asheville's hot right now, so this is a golden time to list." I heard pen scratching paper. Dylan, seated beside him, asked in a tone so casual it chilled me, "Hey, let's say, the house is still in my mom's name after we renovate. Can we switch ownership after the sale?" Colin hesitated. "Legally, you need the owner's signature. But if the family agrees, the process is quick." Harper cut in. "Oh, she agrees to everything, she just gets mixed up with paperwork. She's not into managing this stuff anymore." They laughed, and a spoon clinked against porcelain metal on china, like a needle pricking my heart. I didn't step out. I sat in my bedroom, watching the live feed, Harper playing dutiful daughter-in-law before the agent, and Dylan, the boy I carried while Evan traveled for work, now nodding like an accomplice. My hands shook so much I set the cup down. But I didn't cry. Tears would only make them stronger. I needed clarity. After nearly an hour, Colin stood, shook Harper's hand, and said, "I'll prep a detailed valuation. With some decluttering and photos, you could list in 2 weeks. Congratulations, you've got a valuable asset." Harper beamed, as if she'd just closed a great deal. The door shut, leaving the smell of coffee mixed with the vanilla room spray Harper liked thick and artificial. I quietly turned off my phone and sat still until my heart settled. From the living room, Harper's voice rose clear and cold. "I'll call the lender about the deposit for the South Asheville place. Good schools. Quiet. Perfect for a family." Dylan mumbled. "What about Mom?" Harper answered, lower but still audible on the mic. "Senior living. I found a place with great reviews, private rooms, quiet. On paper, it looks perfect. She'll adjust." I let out a dry, strangled laugh. Senior living. That's what they called their plan to push me out, dressed up in pretty words. I took out my phone and exported the video. 3 clips. Harper entertaining the agent, Dylan asking about switching ownership later, and the line about senior living. I sent everything to Talia, with a short note. "Here's proof of intent to take over. They're moving on the first steps." In under 10 minutes, Talia replied, 24-karat evidence. Keep the originals untouched. I'll guide next steps. And Claudia, you're doing everything right. Just 4 lines, but it felt like someone had breathed life back into me. In this fight, I wasn't alone. When night fell, I walked into the living room. Harper and Dylan had gone out to dinner. The house was unusually quiet, only the wall clock ticking. I moved slowly through the room, touching the old things, the Tiffany lamp still casting warm gold, the leather armchair still dented where Evan used to sit. I lifted our wedding photo, the one Harper had removed, and hung it back where it belonged. Evan was still smiling in it, pride in his eyes. I whispered, "Love, I'm keeping my promise. I won't let them turn this home into a cheap commodity." Then, I took a small notebook and wrote, in steady strokes, June 14th. They brought an agent to appraise the house. They discussed selling and a new place in South Asheville. I sat 2 walls away and heard every word. They decided I was invisible. And because of that, I'll make sure they see me in a way they won't expect. I closed the notebook and set it on the coffee table. Outside, a thin moon rose, washing a pale glow over the living room wall. I turned off all the lights except the Tiffany lamp, the lamp that was Evan's, and now stands guard over my honor. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window with a cup of tea gone cold, thinking about everything. About Evan, about the son I once believed was a good man, about the daughter-in-law planning each move. I didn't feel hatred, just a raw emptiness like someone had scooped out my softest part and packed it with ice. I opened the notebook and added one last line. June 14th, I set a 7-day deadline, 7 days to prepare a counterplan. I didn't. I know exactly how everything would play out, but I knew I wouldn't sit still. I would collect, record, and protect every inch of this house of what is mine. Early morning, the first sunlight streamed into the living room. I sat by the window frame, watching tiny dust motes sparkle in the light like millions of floating memories. Outside, Harper's car sounded. I heard her voice carrying on the phone. "Yeah, Colin. Please email the valuation. We want to list next week if my mother-in-law signs quickly." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. In my head, Talia's voice was clear. "Don't confront them head-on before it's time. Let them expose themselves." I smiled, smoothed my hair, and stood up. On the table, my wedding photo with Evan caught the sun, shimmering like a reminder. There are things people can buy but never truly own, and this house is one of them. That morning, I woke earlier than usual. Asheville air was a little crisp, dew still clinging to the rose, canes on the porch. I looked at myself in the mirror. The face with wrinkles no longer made me sad. I chose a beige dress in the soft fabric Evan liked and put on the pearl earrings he gave me for our 25th anniversary. In the mirror, the light reflected a woman I had once forgotten, not the gentle old lady they imagined, but Claudia Hart, who worked 30 years and paid for this house down to the last dollar. I brewed coffee, the whole bean kind Evan loved, kept in a glass jar. When the aroma filled the kitchen, I knew I was ready. Around 8:30, Dylan and Harper woke up. They had argued in low voices in their room, then came out looking tired. I sat at the table, hands around my coffee cup, voice even, "We need to talk." Dylan frowned slightly, and before he could react, I continued, firmer than even I expected. "I bought this house. I decide who lives here and for how long. Any changes in this house require my consent." As the words landed, the room seemed to pause. Dylan blinked, staring at me like he was trying to recognize whether the woman in front of him was really his mother. "Mom, why are you saying this out of nowhere?" I thought. "You thought I would keep staying silent?" I cut in, eyes on him. "No, Dylan, my silence hasn't meant consent." Harper stepped out, phone in hand, lips tilted in a half smirk, half challenge. "Claudia, you must be misremembering. This house was bought with Dad's life insurance, and Dylan should have a share of that. I'm only helping you modernize it." I set my cup down, voice low but precise. "No, Harper. I'm not misremembering. I signed the contract, my name is on the deed, and I've paid every property tax for 6 years. This is my legal asset." I picked up the remote and turned on the TV. The camera clip came up, Colin the real estate agent, voice clear. "The price could reach $310,000 to $330,000 if you list at the right time." I tapped again. Harper's voice came through, sharp. "I'll handle the paperwork. My mother-in-law won't live forever." "Senior living sounds good anyway." Senior living echoed through the room like a knife. Dylan whipped toward Harper, face flushing. You said that?" Harper froze, her voice catching. "I was joking." I turned off the TV and faced them. "No need to argue," I said evenly. "I don't need excuses. I only want you to understand one thing. I know everything." Dylan forced a smile. "Mom, you recorded us? Why would you do that?" I answered plainly, "No." I protected my home. I stood and pulled a paper from the envelope I'd placed on the table, the printout from my attorney, Talia Chen. "I've retained an attorney," I said. "If, 7 days from today, you have not moved out, she will file for eviction and a no trespass order with the court." Harper's eyes widened, her voice harsh. "You can't do that. We're family." I nodded. "Yes, but family doesn't mean permission to violate boundaries. Family means respect, not exploitation." Dylan lowered his head. I could see him wrestling with embarrassment and anger. "Mom, I just wanted to ease your burden. This house needs maintenance, someone to take care of it. I didn't mean I cut in. You let someone else decide everything in my kitchen without me. That's not helping, Dylan, that's taking over." Harper shifted tactics fast. She inhaled, softened her tone, eyes glossing like she might cry. "I only want you to have a better life. I'm afraid you're lonely. Things here are old, updating them would make you happier. I meant no harm." I looked at her for a long moment. I had been a woman who knew how to cry to diffuse conflict. I recognized purposeful tears. "Harper," I said slowly, "if you truly wanted to help, you would ask before acting. You would respect what belongs to someone else. If you only want to replace, that isn't help, that's erasure." Harper lowered her gaze, silent. Dylan sat down, fingers laced, lips tight. I exhaled light but steady. From now on, There are 3 rules in this house. 1. Respect. No one changes anything without my approval. 2. Ask. Every expense, every plan must be transparent. 3. Share costs. I am not a bank and not a sponsor. If you can't meet these 3, then you leave. The room went still. I could hear the clock ticking, counting the seconds stretching between us. Dylan lifted his head, voice unsteady. "Mom, I know I was wrong. Don't be so tense. Can I give you a hug?" I stepped back. "No, Dylan. Gestures don't replace responsibility. You don't need to hug me, you need to understand me." He froze, hands suspended. His eyes glistened, then dropped. I felt no triumph, only a bone-deep sadness, a quiet space between 2 generations. I turned to Harper, gentler but firm. "I'm giving you 7 days. I'm not throwing you out. I'm giving you time to choose, comply or leave." Harper looked away, lips pressed tight. Dylan started to speak, then didn't. I cleared my cup and carried it to the sink. Under the sound of running water, I felt a settled calm. In the 6 years since Evan died, this was the first time I truly felt in control of my life. At noon, I sat on the porch and texted Maeve. I told them, 7 days. If anything happens, can you stand as my witness? She replied immediately, "Of course." "And Claudia? You came back today, not the quiet one anymore." I set the phone down and looked at the roses. Sunlight hit the red petals, gleaming like jewels. I thought maybe Evan was watching me from somewhere, smiling. In the afternoon, Harper moved through the kitchen, cleaning in silence. Dylan went to the yard to make a call, voice low. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I had a plan, evidence, an attorney, a friend beside me, and, more than anything, put myself back. Night fell, the house quiet. I sat before the wedding photo, the Tiffany lamp warming Evan's face. I whispered, "Do you see, love?" I finally stood up. I spoke again in my own voice. I smiled slightly, sure of one thing more than ever. I'm no longer the compliant Claudia they knew. I am the mother, the woman no one can erase from this house. That night, wind pushed hard along the porch, the damp smell of earth slipping through the doorframe after rain. I was about to turn off the light when I heard a spoon hit a porcelain cup in the living room. A small sound, but in a silent house it felt like the opening cue for another battle. I stopped, kept the lights off. Through the crack of my door, pale yellow spilled from the living room where Harper and Dylan sat facing each other. I quietly opened the camera app on my phone and switched to record. Every word came through as if the walls themselves were carrying it to me. "You're too weak, Dylan," Harper hissed. "I told you if you don't act decisively, your mother will never leave. She's playing the victim to gain sympathy." Dylan answered, tired. "You're pushing this too far. I just wanted to stay for a while. You turned it into a whole plan to take the house. Do you know Mom already found a lawyer?" Harper lowered her voice, but the mic still caught it. "You think I don't know? It's just a scare tactic. An old woman in her 60s, hands shaking when she signs. What can she do?" I clenched my phone, heart pounding, but I still didn't step out. Not out of fear, but because I needed them to say it all, so this house, its walls, would remember everything. Next morning, when they went out, I installed the second camera in the hallway above the landscape painting. From there, it could see my bedroom door, the stairs, and the kitchen. Every movement saved to the cloud, second by second. That afternoon, I replayed the footage. What I saw tightened my throat. Harper and Dylan were in the living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes. They folded my coats, the knit scarves I made, even Evan's porcelain set. Each item went into boxes labeled donation. Harper said breezily, "Just pack first. She never uses this stuff anyway." Dylan stayed quiet, head down as he closed the lids. Watching that on my screen, I felt something in me fracture. Not because they took things, but because they acted as if I had already disappeared. The next day at noon, Harper sat on the porch making a call. I sat in the kitchen, quietly listening through the camera. "Hi, Miss Ruth," Harper said sweetly. "Remember me? I mentioned my mother-in-law the other day. I think you should come talk to her. She seems confused, not very coherent." I knew immediately she meant Ruth Navarro. A mediator. Harper had mentioned someone who handles families with elders needing guardianship. Harper added, voice dropping, "If possible, could you also bring up a power of attorney so we can help manage her finances? Tomorrow afternoon?" I set down my teacup, my chest sinking. So after failing with the agent, they chose to attack my capacity. The following afternoon, Ruth arrived, a woman around 50, neat curls, half-rimmed glasses, carrying a large leather bag. Harper welcomed her warmly, as if hosting a consultation in her own home. I poured coffee, set it gently on the table. "Please," I said, calm. Ruth smiled, but her eyes scanned the house like an appraisal. "Thank you. I just want to chat a little. Your son and his wife said you've had trouble managing your assets lately, is that right?" I glanced at Harper, who lowered her head in a worried pose. Dylan sat silent. I took a sip and said, "No. I'm lucid enough to know who is in my home and who tried to change the locks without asking." Ruth paused, then kept her smile. "I understand. Sometimes a financial power of attorney can reduce stress. At this age, paperwork mistakes can cause issues." I opened my bag and pulled the envelope I'd prepared. Inside was a letter from my family doctor, Dr. Simmons, who examined me last week. "This is my capacity statement," I said, sliding it to Ruth. "My doctor confirms I'm fully competent, memory intact, with no signs of cognitive decline." Ruth read a few lines, then nodded slowly. "I see." Her initial confidence faded. Harper jumped in, trying to recover. "Miss Ruth, I only meant she should have support, not that we doubt her," Dylan added. "We just want to protect Mom." I looked at them both, voice quiet but firm. "If you want to protect, start by not lying." No one spoke. Ruth's eyes shifted. She stood and said neutrally, "I understand. Perhaps this isn't the right time. Keep my card in case you want to talk further." I smiled and accepted the card like a piece of evidence. "Thank you, Ruth. I'll keep it safe." She left in silence. Harper looked at me, trying to appear composed, but her hand trembled around the cup. Dylan avoided my eyes and muttered, "Mom, you misunderstood." I didn't answer. I just tapped stop recording in my pocket, every word of the conversation saved. That night I sent the audio file to Talia with a note. They brought in a mediator, mentioned financial power of attorney. "I have evidence." "In under 10 minutes, Talia replied. "Perfect, Claudia. You're doing exactly right. Keep the original files. Tomorrow I'll send the notice to terminate their stay. Be ready." I leaned back and closed my eyes. The house was quiet. I could hear light rain on the roof, steady as the heartbeat of the one who's gone, Evan, who always believed every home has a soul. Next morning, Maeve arrived in a jean jacket with a big tote. "What's next, Claudie?" she asked, eyes tender and encouraging. I opened the cabinet and pointed to the boxes labeled donation. "Relabel everything. I won't let even one of Evan's scarves be stamped as charity." Have you ever seen someone try to redefine an elder's capacity? In this part, what angered you most, the donation boxes or the POA suggestion? Tell me in the comments, so this story can become a shared voice. We worked all morning. Maeve replaced labels. I made an inventory. The important things, deed, insurance papers, savings, I put into the auxiliary safe in my bedroom. Maeve kept the spare key. We locked it and carried the file bag to her house 3 blocks away. "Safer with me," she said. Talia said the same. "And Claudie, don't forget to change every password." I nodded. That evening I changed every bank, email, and the smart lock on the front door. Each time the keypad lit, it felt like I was closing another door they'd opened without permission. Late at night, I printed the termination notice under North Carolina law from Talia's email. I read every line carefully, then added a handwritten closing, "The violators must vacate within 7 days from the date signed. If not, the owner reserves the right to request law enforcement intervention." I signed at the bottom, my handwriting shaky but clear. Then I taped the notice discreetly in the kitchen, just under the cabinet right where Harper opened every morning for her juice glass. I stepped back, watched the white paper glow under the warm light, and felt like I'd hung a protective charm. Outside, wind nudged the curtains. The house was silent, but I knew its walls had heard everything, heard their plans, heard my words, and now stood with me. I turned off the light and whispered, "Listen, Evan, hear me, I finally learned how to protect myself." In the dark, the porch wind sounded like an answer, warm and steady. On the 3rd morning after I posted the notice in the kitchen, the house was strangely quiet. No yoga music from Harper, fewer footsteps from Dylan. I thought they were preparing to leave quietly until Harper walked into the kitchen, resting a hand lightly on her stomach, her face a mix of stress and calculation. "Claudia," she called, softer and slower than usual. I need to talk to you." I was wiping the table and looked up. Morning light crossed her face pale, trying to appear fragile. "I'm pregnant," Harper said, eyes down, voice barely above a breath. I paused half a beat. The words dropped into the kitchen like a pebble into a deep well, quiet but seismic. I set the cloth down and drew a long breath. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded, fingers laced over her belly like cradling a life already here. "Just 6 weeks. We haven't told anyone. I don't want to make things worse. I just hope you understand we can't move out now." Harper lifted her head. Her voice shook, but her eyes brightened like someone who'd found a winning card. "For the baby, Mom. You were a mother, you understand. I just need a stable place, at least until I give birth. After that, we'll go." I went quiet. In my mind flashed the young Evan when I was pregnant with Dylan, how he prepared everything, from the little crib to the body pillow. I know the fear and tenderness of a mother-to-be. But I also remembered Talia's words very clearly from our consult last week. "Pregnancy doesn't create residency rights or property ownership, Claudia. Don't let feelings derail judgment. Good hearts can be exploited through their kindest instincts." I poured water, my hand still faintly shaking. "Harper," I said softly, "I bless the baby, but that doesn't change the boundary. This is my home, and I was clear about the 7-day deadline. I won't take it back." Harper stared at me for a few seconds, then her look shifted to wounded anger. "You're heartless," she snapped. "You're throwing your pregnant daughter-in-law out on the street?" "What kind of mother-in-law does that?" I breathed in. "I'm not throwing anyone out. I'm asking you to leave a place you tried to take. There's a difference, Harper." Dylan came down the stairs, face confused. "Harper, come on," he said quietly. "Don't do this." "Be quiet," she shot back. "Don't you see she has no heart? She only cares about the house, not blood." Dylan stayed silent, avoiding my eyes. I knew my son was stuck in the middle, but this time I didn't try to rescue the moment. I looked straight at Harper. "Don't use the baby as a shield to justify crossing boundaries, Harper. A good mother starts with honesty, not manipulation." The air turned heavy. Harper opened her mouth to speak, then didn't. I turned, opened the drawer, and pulled out the paper I had prepared. "This is the final notice," I said, setting it on the table. 7 days starting today. I wrote it by hand and signed it clearly. When the deadline comes, I'll proceed under the law. Harper looked at the paper like, It was a sentence. Dylan lowered his head, lips pressed tight. I folded the dishcloth, hung it back on the hook, and left the kitchen without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick in the dark. Outside, wind hissed softly through the trees. I thought of Evan, his voice in hard times, always low and steady. Keep the house, keep your honor. Don't let anyone decide for you what home is. I turned to the side and touched the wedding photo on the nightstand. Evan, I whispered, I'm doing what you would do, right? Tears fell onto the pillow, and I didn't wipe them away. Some tears don't belong to weakness, they belong to someone reclaiming ownership. Before sunrise, I got up. Pale blue light seeped through the curtains like thin mist. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and plugged in the external drive. Every video file, audio clip, journal entry, and photo of the notice in the kitchen, I gathered them into one folder and named it Proof 7 Days. I sent that package to Talia with a message. This is all the evidence I have. I want everything clear before the deadline. 10 minutes later, she replied, Very good, Claudia. I have everything. You're on the right track. Stay calm, I'll monitor the legal side. Reading that line eased me. In the chaos of betrayal, at least one person believed me and we had a clear plan. Near noon, Maeve stopped by with 2 smoothies and a soft smile. Walk? She asked. It's a beautiful day. We went along the little neighborhood road. Maple leaves drifted down, cool air brushing like a soothing hand. I told her briefly that Harper was pregnant, my voice dropping. Maeve listened, then laid a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she said. Pregnancy isn't a free pass. If you cave now, you'll lose everything later. Hey, try the 4-7-8 breathing. Talia taught me during that. Mess with my brother. Inhale 4, hold 7, exhale 8. Keep doing it settles the nerves. I followed. Inhale 4 beats, hold 7, exhale 8. Wind slipped through my hair, and someone's rose garden sent a faint scent. My chest loosened, like a knot finally untied. That afternoon the kitchen was quiet. Harper and Dylan had gone out. I stood in the familiar room, light falling across the old wooden counter. On the shelf sat Evan's tea set, the one Harper used to serve the agent, without asking me. I took a soft cloth and wiped each piece, carefully, like touching a memory. Every tiny scratch in the porcelain was a slice of time mornings at the window, him with the paper, me with the kettle. I put the set back exactly where it used to be, a small ritual of taking ownership back. My hands were steady now. I knew exactly what I was doing. I wasn't fighting to push someone out. I was protecting the place that once held the heart of a marriage, of youth, of memory. That evening I wrote in my journal, June 17th, Harper says she's pregnant. I believe it, but I won't let it blind me. I am not against a child, I am against deceit. Evan, you taught me that kindness without boundaries becomes a trap. I understand that now. I closed the book and listened to the wind threading through the eaves. Somewhere in the house, the walls stayed silent, but I felt them watching, witnessing each step as I reclaimed my place. Outside, a light rain began. I turned off the lamp and stood at the window. In the dark, I spoke quietly, not for anyone else but for myself. Keep the house. Keep your honor. Keep your calm. Then I left the kitchen, the scent of coffee, and the ticking clock behind me, the familiar breath of a home waking from a long sleep of silence. Friday evening, the last sunlight pooled on the porch like slow honey. The wall clock struck 6, 1 beat at a time. I stood in the living room and heard a car stop at the curb. Talia texted, I'm here, waiting in the car. Officer Jackson is with me, per schedule, just in case. I looked through the window, a silver SUV at the curb. Talia stepped out in a white shirt and gray vest, composed. Next to her stood a uniformed officer with a notebook. They wouldn't come in unless needed. I gave a slight nod through the glass, letting them know I was fine. Inside, the hard scrape of a suitcase dragged across the floor. Harper was closing the last box. Her perfume mixed with cardboard dust, thickening the air. Dylan stood by the stairs, hands in his pockets, eyes down. "We're not done," Harper said without looking up. "Can you give us a few more hours?" "I already gave 2 weeks," I answered even. "It's 6 o'clock, the deadline," I stated in writing. "I'm not throwing you out. I'm following the law." She flipped her hair and curled a thin smile. "Law, law, always the law. In the end, what do you have besides this house?" I looked straight at her, not angry, just calm. "I have the truth and legal records." "You have words." Dylan stepped closer, voice small but edged. "Mom, I don't want drama, but if you're this rigid, I'll tell Dad's side of the family. Everyone will hear how you treated your son and daughter-in-law." I exhaled not from fear, but from sadness that he still believed truth could be drowned out by noise. "Tell whoever you want," I said slowly. "But I have evidence, video, audio, and my attorney's statement. I don't need threats. I have facts." Silence fell. The clock ticked again, counting the last seconds of their hold on my home. Harper gripped the suitcase handle, eyes cold. "I hope this empty house makes you happy," she said sweetly enough to sting. "It isn't empty," I said softly. "It's clean." She turned and rolled the suitcase out the door. Dylan followed, stopped for a second, and looked back at me. His eyes swirled with regret and pride. I couldn't read it, so I said one last thing. "Dylan, I hope you find your self-respect before you try to find your mother again." The door clicked shut. That small clack was the first sound of freedom. The house was so quiet I could hear wind nudging the window frames. I stood in the living room as the last light spread gold across the floor like a fresh cover. No footsteps, no synthetic essential oils smothering Evan's coffee, no appraising eyes, only relief. I sat on the sofa, felt the cushion give. Beside me lay the embroidered floral pillow I thought Harper had thrown out. I smoothed the fabric and whispered, "This house is mine again." My voice was small, but in that quiet space, it felt like a declaration. Half an hour later, a knock. Maeve walked in with a paper bag and a bright grin. "Mission accomplished?" I laughed. "Completely. They left at 6 o'clock sharp. Then it's time to celebrate." She lifted the bag. "Butter-filled, waffles, and fresh ground coffee. I'm brewing." We nudged the table back, opened the windows to let the last of the evening light in. Air flowed free. Dust shimmered like golden threads. Maeve laid out the food. "I remember the first time I came here. Your house smelled like almond and linen. Lately it was nothing but sharp peppermint oil." I chuckled and poured coffee. "We're back now." Almond, coffee, and silence. She nodded. "Silence is a luxury too, Claudie." I opened the front door wide. The whole block glowed in sunset. Sparrows hopped along the fence. Neighbors laughed in their yards, and a far-off radio carried the evening news. Life slipped back into its rhythm, no longer occupied, no longer disturbed. Inside me, there was an odd, pleasant emptiness, not sadness, space to breathe. I texted Talia. "They're gone. No incident. Thank you for everything." She replied almost instantly. "I'm happy for you, Claudia. Watch the next few weeks. They might come back to demand items or stir trouble. If anything happens, call me or the police." I sent a thumbs up and set the phone down. That night, I put the house back in order. I started with the kitchen where it all began. I removed the spice jars Harper bought, dumped the spoiled turmeric, and reset the shelves my way. I grabbed a fresh set of sheets and changed the living room sofa. As the clean fabric slid into place, it felt like wiping away weeks of strain. The washer hummed, water flowed like a soothing soundtrack. On the shelf, I put on Jazz Dave Brubeck's Take 5, Evan's favorite. The warm saxophone notes drifted through the rooms like a greeting from the past. I smiled. Harper was right about one thing. The house was empty, but empty clean, empty for real life to come back, not the pretend kind. Around 8, Maeve headed home. Before leaving, she hugged me light but warm. "I'm proud of you, Claudie. Not because you beat them, but because I came back to yourself." I smiled. Me too. For the first time in years, I feel at peace inside my own walls. The door closed. I dimmed the lights, leaving only the Tiffany lamp's soft gold. The house rested, bathed in music. I sat at the dining table, pulled out a blank page, and wrote the first lines of my boundary list. 1. No one enters my home without my consent. 2. No one speaks for me, signs for me, or protects me by stripping my rights. 3. Kindness can be a gift, but kindness needs a fence. 4. Everything in this house holds a memory. If you touch it with respect. 5. If one day I grow weak, remember, I still have a voice and I will use it. I read it over and felt calm. This paper wasn't for Harper or Dylan. It was for my future self in case I ever forgot that I have the right to say no. I stuck it on the fridge between 2 photos, one of Evan and me at our 30th anniversary, and one Maeve took of us laughing on the porch. The light caught the ink, making the words glow. I sat on the sofa, closed my eyes, and listened to the wind in the curtains. There was no fear left in this house, only warmth, coffee, and the jazz fading down. I spoke softly, like closing a long chapter. "Welcome home, Claudia." And in that moment, I knew. Sometimes the biggest win isn't keeping a roof, it's finding yourself inside it. I thought after that Friday afternoon, everything would be quiet. I was wrong. The second storm didn't come through the front door, it came through familiar phones. Monday morning, while I was watering roses on the porch, the phone rang. The screen read, "Aunt Nora." Evan's cousin, who cried in my arms at the funeral, who once said, "You're the best part of Evan that remains." "Claudia, what is going on?" Her voice was rough, irritated. "Dylan called me last night. Harper's pregnant and you kicked them out? How could you?" I took a breath, kept steady. "Aunt Nora, it's not that. Simple. No need to explain." She cut in. "A good mother knows how to sacrifice. You live alone in a big house, why not show some mercy?" I gripped the phone. Morning sun still lit the dew on the roses, but inside my sky dropped another floor. "Aunt," I said softly, "sacrifice only means something when it isn't being exploited." On the other end, silence. Then the line went dead. Soon after, the phone rang again. Cousin Jeff. He once stayed in my house 2 months after his divorce. Now his tone was half scolding, half sighing. "Hey, I heard from Dylan you're tense. Maybe give them another chance. Harper's about to be a mom." "Jeff," I asked, "have you listened to me at all? Or only to him?" He hesitated, then offered one line. "You're old, don't end up alone. Forgive." I hung up and set the phone on the table. For a moment, I heard my own blood in my ears. Not anger, hurt. People who once ate at my table and heard my stories. All about Evan now turned away after one call from Dylan. By noon, another call. Evan's old friend, Clarence. "Claudia, I heard you lost your temper and want to take your own son to court. Is that true?" "I'm not suing. I'm protecting my property. But that house is where Evan lived. Aren't you afraid people will say you forgot what you owe him?" I let out a small, dry laugh. "If Evan heard that, he'd crack up, Clarence. He taught me to keep what we built, not hand it to someone who disrespects it." Silence for a few seconds, then he hung up. I sat and watched the screen light and dim. Each call was an accusation carried like an arrow, sent by people I once trusted. That afternoon, Maeve found me sitting on the porch, phone face down. More calls, she asked, handing me iced tea. Yeah, everyone has an opinion about a good mother. They forget to ask whether any good child makes his mother change the locks. Maeve sat, studied me, and said, softly, Claudie, stop picking up. The ones who get you don't need your defense. The ones who don't, you could talk a lifetime and it won't matter. I nodded. She was right. That night, I silenced the phone. For the first time in years, I allowed myself not to hear everything. But not everyone called to accuse me. Near midnight, a text from Dylan lit the screen. I hesitated, then opened it. When you're truly old, don't come to me. I read it again and again, my heart stinging but no longer collapsing. I typed back, I don't need your care. I need respect, the very thing you didn't give. I hit send and took a long breath. Next morning, as I was making coffee, a video call came in. The name read, Piper Hart, my brother's daughter, Marcus Jr.'s girl. Auntie. Her voice was clear but trembling a little. They're trashing you on Facebook, saying you're cold to Dylan. But I don't believe it. I know you're not like that. I smiled, eyes wet. Thank you, Piper. Do you have proof? She asked quietly, leaning toward the camera. I nodded. I do. I kept everything. Here. I shared a short clip. Harper talking about senior living and listing the house. Piper went quiet, then said firmly, I'll tell Dad. Don't worry, you're not alone. The call ended, but my heart brightened a shade. In all that noise, someone still believed in the light of truth. That afternoon, Marcus, my brother, called. His voice was low and measured. You holding up, Claudie? Mostly. You? I heard Dylan's side, but I know him. He's impulsive and his wife eggs him on. Your boy, you know how he is. I paused, then said, I do, but knowing doesn't mean accepting. Marcus sighed, long and airy, like wind in old trees through the phone. I'm proud of you. Stand firm. And Evan, if he were alive, I believe he'd stand beside you. This time, I cried for real, not from pain, but from being understood. After that call, I opened an old photo album on my computer. Pictures of Dylan as a kid, brown hair, clutching a chicken drumstick bigger than his wrist, smiling bright. I scrolled a 10th birthday, graduation, a shot of him hugging Evan after college. And then the latest, Dylan next to Harper, both staring at the laptop the day we talked about fixing the house. I looked at his face, the features were still my son's, but the eyes were different. Part of me wanted to blame Harper, but another part knew this betrayal had both their names on it. I closed the album, my heart lighter. Maybe for the first time, I wasn't trying to fix the memory, I was simply accepting it. That night, under warm lamplight, I set up an easel in the living room. I hadn't painted since Evan died. Tonight, I needed to do something just for me. I mixed colors and painted the horizon behind the Blue Ridge, the route Evan and I drove every fall. Layer by layer, blue settled over. Soft violet. When I finished, I signed the lower right corner, C.H. 2 simple letters, but I had never written them for myself before. Every past painting was signed Claudia and Evan. I studied the canvas a long while, calm. Maybe this is how I close a chapter, not by erasing it, but by painting a new one over the top. That night, I slept straight through with no dreams. No doors slamming, no strange footsteps, just steady breathing and a hint of lavender in the air. The next morning, I made coffee and stepped onto the porch. Gentle sunlight lay over the rose garden in bloom. The flowers bent under the night's dew, so fresh it was as if they'd never known a storm. I took a photo, posted it on Instagram, and wrote, "At last, what needed to leave has left." The roses still bloom. Within minutes, the morning walking group sent a flood of hearts with little comments. "So beautiful, Claudie. You're making me want to plant roses today." Your house looks bright again. I smiled, took a sip of coffee, and felt as warm as the first light of day. The storm passed, and I'm still here, whole, clear, and free. Tuesday afternoon, while I was sweeping leaves in the yard, a silver sedan eased to a stop at the gate. I recognized it right away, the familiar plate, the familiar soft thud of the car door. Dylan got out first, shirt wrinkled, face tired. Harper followed, her belly showing more now. In the back seat, I saw Aunt Nora, blue fedora tilted to one side, eyes sharp like a freshly honed blade. I stood still, broom in hand, wind tipping the rose canes behind me. Harper spoke first, her voice part apology, part rehearsal. "Claudia, I'm sorry. We were really wrong. I know you're angry, but we have nowhere to go. The temporary place we rented is dirty and cramped, and I'm pregnant." She set her hand on her belly, a slow, calculated move. Dylan stared at the ground, silent like a boy forced to apologize without knowing why. I nodded slightly but said nothing. Harper took one more step, eyes shimmering. "We're just asking to stay a few days until we find another place. Really? We only need a few weeks." I set the broom down, took a long breath, then lifted my hand to my chest. "Harper," I said, "I understand there's a life here that needs protecting." I gestured lightly toward her belly. "But here, I set my hand over my heart. There's someone else who needs protecting, and that person is me." Harper blinked, lips pressing together. Aunt Nora cleared her throat and stepped forward, voice tight and commanding, "Claudia, I know you're angry, but have you no humanity left? That's your own son, your blood." I turned to her, calm. "Aunt Nora, humanity doesn't mean letting people trample your boundaries. I learned that at too high a price." She rolled her eyes and jabbed, "You're old, don't be so bitter." I smiled. Age isn't a reason to lose boundaries. It's the reason to guard them even more. I invited them into the living room. The air was tight as a freshly cranked string. I set down a tea tray. A soft cinnamon rose scent lifted through the room. Dylan glanced around the house, looked the same, only neater, brighter. "Before you go on," I began, "I need to be clear. If you truly want to stay temporarily, I can only accept on non-negotiable conditions." Harper and Aunt Nora exchanged a look. Dylan frowned. I listed them slowly. 1. Respect no meddling, no changes, no touching my things. 2. Share household costs clearly. I don't support other adults. 3. A specific time frame, no open-ended stays. And last, if you truly want to stay, you sign a temporary lodging agreement with proper notarization. If any of these are missing, I refuse. Silence fell. Aunt Nora gave a short, scornful laugh. "Heavens! Do you think your home is a law firm? Papers and contracts with your own son?" "Claudia, bitterness is swallowing your heart." I answered evenly, "No. I'm letting reason protect my heart." Harper shifted tone quickly, softer, almost trembling. "I don't want to sign anything. I just want to rest. I'm exhausted. The doctor said I should avoid stress." She laid a hand on her belly and exhaled. "If you won't let us stay, then could you lend us money? We'll find another place. Just a small amount, please." I looked at her a long time. "All right. But I need a repayment plan, a clear due date, and signatures from both of you." Harper faltered and glanced at Dylan. He avoided my eyes. "Mom, we don't know exactly yet. Once things settle, we'll send it back." "So there is no plan," I concluded, quiet but cool. "Then my answer is no." Aunt Nora sprang up, louder. "Claudia, who have you become? If Evan were alive, he'd be heartbroken. You're turning your son away and shutting the door on family?" I met her gaze, steady. "If Evan were alive, Aunt, he would understand. He taught me that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you." The air thickened. Harper stood, voice shaky but frosty. "I get it. You win. I hope this spotless house makes you happy." It sounded like a rerun of last time, except this time it didn't hurt. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. Afternoon light poured in, warm and straight. "I don't need to win, Harper. I need peace." "The door stays open, but not to lies." Dylan looked up, a flicker of shame passing through his eyes, then lowered his head and pulled the suitcase. Aunt Nora shot me one last glare, and they all left. The door closed. The sound of wheels on the road faded, and then was gone. I stood for a while. The room was still, holding only the scent of cinnamon rose tea and pale light on the wall. I sat at the table, opened my notebook, and wrote a few lines. June 22nd. Dylan came back with Harper and Aunt Nora. They said sorry, they wanted to stay, then borrow money. I refused warmly but firmly. "I'm not angry anymore, I just won't let them cross my boundaries again." I signed my name, then scanned the entire meeting record with timestamps. I filed it carefully in a folder labeled Home Legal. Caution not from fear, but from learning to keep proof for my self-respect. That night, Maeve called. "Done, Claudie?" "Done," I laughed. "That chapter's closed. Then let's see a movie tonight. I booked seats at the little theater on Main. Classic film, jazz score fits your mood." I chuckled and said yes. The tiny theater had maybe 20 seats, lights soft and low. The film was Roman Holiday. I sat in the middle, sipped soda, and listened to Audrey Hepburn laugh on screen. It felt strange, like youth had returned, but this time without the fear someone would snatch it away. When we left, night air lifted my hair, and vanilla drifted over from the bakery nearby. Maeve bought 2 crisp waffles and handed me one. "Remember this smell? Evan loved these." I nodded, smiling. He did. But now it doesn't feel sad anymore. We walked and laughed, our shadows long on the lit sidewalk. Back home, I opened the door and turned on the kitchen light. The air was warm, touched with new vanilla from the bag. I set it on the table and poured a glass of warm milk. I sat and wrote in my journal, evening of June 22nd. They returned with apologies that smelled like a script. I listened, didn't soften. I opened the door, didn't let hatred in, but didn't let deceit stay. Love is respecting boundaries, not breaking them in the name of family. I closed the book and looked around the house. Everything was intact, not just the things, but the peace. I turned off the light, let the vanilla scent drift through the air, and smiled. Freedom has its own fragrance. Tonight, it's sweet. Saturday morning, I was watering plants when the doorbell rang 3 short, urgent chimes. Not the mail carrier, not Maeve's knock. I cracked the door, and my heart paused. A young woman stood there, hair in a bun, tired but kind face. In her arms, a baby boy wrapped in a soft beige blanket. The faint smell of milk, powder, and newborn skin slipped into the space between us. "Mrs. Claudia?" Her voice shook, small as a breath. "I'm Harper's cousin. She asked me to bring baby Rowan to see you." I looked at the baby. Fine brown hair like silk threads, round cheeks, tiny hand loosely curled. He gave a small sound so faint, and somehow it felt like I'd just heard my own heart melt. "How many weeks?" I asked, my voice rough. "Just over 3 weeks. Harper says he's healthy, but she's not ready to call you. She just wanted you to see him for a moment." She swayed the baby gently. A light breeze carried warm milk scent and the damp green of the yard. My heart tilted. I thought I'd locked every emotional door after so many hurts. But standing there, looking at a brand new, guiltless life, I understood compassion hadn't vanished. It was simply learning not to be used. I drew a breath. Talia's words sounded clear in my head, as if she stood beside me. "Claudia, don't let a newborn become a bargaining chip." Love for your grandchild is different from letting his parents keep crossing lines. I nodded slightly, then spoke slowly. Thank you for bringing him. Tell Harper and Dylan I bless Rowan. I hope he grows strong and is loved in the right way. The young woman blinked. Would you like to hold him for a moment? I looked at the child one last time. My whole body wanted to step forward, but I stopped. Not today, I said with a gentle smile. When things have healed, when the adults respect each other, I'll be the first to open the door. She nodded, eyes wet. I understand. I'll tell her. I brushed the edge of the blanket, not his skin, leaving only a trace of cord, of warmth at my fingertip. Welcome to the world, Rowan, I whispered. May you grow up to love without fearing boundaries. Then I closed the door softly. The stroller wheels rolled away over the stone path, folding into the hush of wind in the trees. I stood still a long time, until my heartbeat steadied. Once the door was shut, tears came slow and heavy. I cried not from regret, but to say goodbye to an illusion that love can last forever if we keep sacrificing without limits. I sat, wiped my face, and felt hollow but quietly lighter. A while later, Maeve arrived. Seeing me, she asked nothing, just opened her arms and held me tight. You didn't reject the baby, she said, warm and low. You rejected the pattern of abuse. Those are two different things. I rested my head on her shoulder and laughed through tears. You know, Maeve, for the first time in my life, saying no feels warm. She squeezed my hand and murmured, because it's a no, from someone who knows her worth. That afternoon, I opened the storage room and looked at the stack of boxes still labeled donation. The things Harper once marked to clear space for their future, now I chose to make it real. I loaded each box into Maeve's car. Inside were clothes, knit scarves, and a few small ceramics. There was no sense of loss, only release. We drove to the church on Lexington, where they run a program for new arrivals in town. The coordinator accepted the items, bowing thanks again and again. I smiled back and watched my things go into storage, not as seized property, but as gifts in the right place. On the way home, Maeve cracked the window. Pine and cinnamon drifted in. It felt like my house had been cleansed. That week, I returned to art class. When I hung the Blue Ridge piece on the easel, the instructor, Mrs. Lorna, paused for a long time. This one has a very true calm, Claudia, she said. Not the kind that comes from fear, the kind that comes from having weathered a storm. I smiled, relieved. Maybe I learned to paint with breath instead of memory. Mrs. Lorna nodded. And that breath is telling me you've come back to yourself. The room went quiet for a few seconds, then soft clapping. I stood before the canvas, looking at the layered blue-violet ridges, gentle, distant, and stubborn. I saw myself there. That night at home, I opened a drawer and took out stationery. I hadn't handwritten a letter in years, but today I wanted to write to my 30-year-ago self, the woman who feared saying no, who thought silence was kindness. I wrote, slow and steady, Dear 37-year-old Claudia, don't be afraid to say no. Refusal doesn't kill love. It only removes those who loved you for their benefit. When you say no, you're saying yes to respect, to the peace you'll find later. Don't forget you're strong not because you don't hurt, but because you can. Stand inside the hurt and refuse to let it define you. I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and wrote on the front, To myself, who once mistook silence for virtue. Then I placed it in the wooden box with our wedding photo. That night I decided to make waffles, the dish I used to make only for guests. This time, I made it just for me. I mixed batter, cracked eggs, dusted in cinnamon and vanilla. The mixer hummed. Warm scent filled the kitchen. I ladled batter onto the iron and listened to the happy little sizzle. When the first batch was done, I plated it and drizzled honey. Crisp golden edges, soft center, gentle sweetness. I took a bite and closed my eyes. So this is what freedom tastes like: simple, warm, and delicious without needing anyone to share it. I took a photo and posted it in the Cooking for One group I joined a few weeks ago. Short caption: cinnamon honey waffles, a recipe for evenings alone but not lonely. Hearts rolled in, and a few comments popped up. Looks so cozy. Miss Claudia, can we have the recipe? Not lonely, I love that. I smiled and typed back, I'll post the recipe in the morning. Everyone deserves a batch made just for themselves. When everything was tidy, I turned off the lights and went to the bedroom. Night air slipped through the curtains. Vanilla and honey lingered in the room. I lay down, warm under the covers, body loose. For the first time in ages, I could feel the weight of sleep like a smooth river stone resting in a stream, cool, round, and calm. Right before I drifted off, I said quietly in my heart, "Thank you, Evan. I kept the house." More than that, I kept myself. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept deeply until dawn, in a home that held only truth, kindness, and the scent of fresh waffles. Time moved like still water. 3 months, then 6, no drama, no raised voices, just morning birds and the smell of coffee in the kitchen. I realized peace doesn't arrive all at once. It's built, day by day. I set a new rhythm for myself. Monday mornings, gentle yoga at the community center where I practiced deep breathing, opening my chest, and letting go of what I can't control. Wednesdays, I tended the roses, trimming each cane, calling each bush by an old friend's name: Eleanor, Constance, Juliet. Friday afternoons, I went to Pack Library downtown for the seniors' book club. We read The Housekeeper and the Professor, then The Secret Garden, then Educated. Each book was a small mirror held up to my cracks, and instead of fear, I learned to look at them with compassion. Sometimes Dylan still appeared not directly, but through texts he sent via my brother, Marcus. One March evening, Marcus called, hesitant. "Dylan wants to know if you could help with a little money. He says Harper hasn't found a job yet, and baby Rowan is sick." I was quiet for a few seconds, looking out the window. Outside, late-season snow dusted the railing. I remembered the old days when Dylan had a fever and I sat up all night with a thermometer. I remembered Harper now, her face already fading in my mind. I spoke slowly and clearly. "Marcus, tell him this. Make a plan, get a job, then talk to me. No one rebuilds a future with an outstretched hand. I won't give money, but I'm willing to show him how to stand up." Marcus exhaled. "You're steady. Maybe that's exactly what he needs to learn." I smiled softly. "No, that's what I needed to learn. And it took half a life to learn it." In April, I repaired the back porch roof where rain had stained the wood. I hired 2 local workers, watched them, then helped paint the boards. The smell of fresh paint mixed with the first-of-season breeze, and the house looked like it was taking a long, healthy breath after a long illness. I replaced the smart lock, installed a doorbell camera, and set the auto alerts. For the first time in years, I felt the house was truly mine in safety, not fear. Each morning, when the doorbell chimed lightly because the wind tripped the sensor, I smiled. "Thank you, Evan. See? I'm keeping my promise." Money-wise, I steadied too. Savings held thanks to a small investment Talia helped me reset. I opened a second account and named it Rainy Day, for health and surprises only. Watching the number climb slowly each month, I felt like I was tending a tree I knew would bloom even if it took time. One evening, I posted in the Women Over 60 Thrive Together group, "When our children grow up, mothers have the right to grow up too. When they grow, we get to grow as well, grow our voice, our boundaries, our self-respect." I didn't expect it, but within a few hours, dozens of responses poured in. "Claudia, you wrote the words in my heart." "Thank you. I thought I was selfish, now I don't." The line, "Mothers have the right to grow too." I printed it and stuck it on my mirror. I read each line, my heart warm like I was hearing a chorus where I'd just sung the first note. Turns out I was never alone. There's a whole generation of women who've quietly endured and are now relearning how to stand tall. At the end of May, Maeve asked me to take a road trip along the Blue Ridge Parkway. "We deserve to see summer in the mountains, Claudie," she said, "and we don't have to ask anyone's permission anymore." I laughed. 2 weeks later, I bought a wide-brimmed straw hat and tied on a pale blue ribbon, a small reward for myself. The trip lasted 4 days. Winding roads, cool wind, wildflowers bursting on both sides. Sometimes we stopped at an overlook and silently watched a sea of clouds drifting. Maeve said, "Time stands with the steadfast, Claudie. It doesn't make us young again, but it gives the truth back." I turned to her and smiled. And that truth, in the end, is the only place we can sleep well. After the trip, I came home with different energy. I started painting again, not just one piece, but a trio. I named them Home, Boundaries, Freedom. Home is the wooden porch with slanting sunlight across the rose pots. Boundaries is a half-open gate with blue morning mist outside. Freedom is the Blue Ridge at sunset violet blending into orange, peaceful and wide. I hung the 3 pieces in the living room, right where Evan's wedding photo used to be. Not to replace it, but to continue it because I know even true love needs boundaries to last. One afternoon, Talia called. "Claudia, are you free next weekend? I'd like to invite you to speak at the community center. Topic is protecting the assets and rights of older adults. I think your story will inspire people." I smiled lightly. I've never spoken in front of a crowd. Just talk like you're telling Maeve. The true story is always the strongest. I hesitated a few seconds, then nodded. "Okay, I'll try." That night, I practiced in front of the mirror. The room reflected a 66-year-old woman, silver in her hair, but bright eyes, a low, clear voice, steady. I looked at myself and said, "My name is Claudia Hart. I used to think old age meant losing the right to decide. I was wrong. The moment I dared to say, 'That's enough,' I started living honestly." I paused, breathed deep, then smiled. "Not bad, Claudia." The next morning, I printed my speech and marked breathing points in red. On the table sat a cup of chamomile tea and a new notebook. The cover read, "Keep Growing." I opened the window. The early sun poured in, gold scattered across the wood floor. Outside, the roses blazed. Each bloom rose up without anyone teaching it how. I whispered, "Time has finally stood with us, not because we're stronger than anyone, but because we chose to be steadfast." The house was quiet, but I could hear my own heartbeat steady, sure, and calm. I knew the journey wasn't over, but I'd gone far enough never to return to the place where I was overrun, and for the first time in a long while, I felt not just surviving, but truly alive. One Sunday afternoon, as the sun slanted across the porch and gold light fell on each rose petal, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, no name saved. I was going to let it ring out, but something made me pick up. "Mom?" The voice was husky, slow, a little shaky. I held my breath. "Dylan?" On the other end, a few seconds of silence. Then quick breaths, like someone fighting back tears. "Yes, it's me. I don't know where to start." I sat on the wooden porch chair and watched the rose fence tremble in the breeze. "Start with the truth," I said softly. He drew a long breath. "Harper and we broke up. She moved back to her mother's. And me, I'm working at a gas station out near Boone. I'm renting a small room. Not much, just a bed and an old radio. But it's peaceful." Dylan's voice caught halfway through. I didn't jump in. I just listened. Listened, like you listen to a river that once raged and is finally slowing itself down. "Mom," he went on, hesitant, "I'm not calling to ask for money. I'm not asking to move back in. I just wanted to say, you were right." I had to hit real life to understand what you did wasn't out of anger, it was to keep your dignity. Thank you for not letting me trample you." A light breeze swept across the porch, the rose leaves whispering. My eyes stung, but not from pain. For years I'd wished to hear an apology. When it finally came, I realized I didn't need to win. I just needed to see my child bow to his own mistakes. I said quietly, "Dylan, I hear you. But you know, an apology is only the first step. Keep growing through your actions." "I understand," he answered, voice small as wind. "I'll try." "No, I will." Then silence. I heard a car engine somewhere and a radio in the background playing "Take Me Home, Country Roads," the song Evan used to sing along to whenever we drove the Blue Ridge. "Do you remember this song?" I asked. Dylan gave a faint, genuine laugh. "Of course, Mom. Dad used to play it every time we went on a picnic." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Old song. Never out of date like honesty." We didn't say anything else. We let the music and the wind fill the space. When the call ended, I set the phone down and looked out at the soft blue of the distant mountains. A valley wind rose, cool and true. It felt like the Blue Ridge was breathing with me lighter, no longer clenched around old resentment. I didn't forgive right away. Forgiveness is a journey, not a moment. But something in me shifted, like a long shut window opening after a long winter. I stood and went inside. The room was full of afternoon light. Evan's Tiffany lamp glowed warm, dragonflies casting shadows on the wall. Whenever I look at it, I feel him there, quiet, kind, gently nodding. "Do you see, Evan?" I whispered toward the mountains. "The boy is finally learning to be a real adult." I smiled, then turned back to the easel. A new canvas waited, unsigned. I took a brush and wrote in small, even letters, "Claudia Hart, 66, still here, I'm still here." Only 3 words, but a declaration. I'm still here after being pushed to the basement, after papers demanding control, after cold words. I'm still here, calm, clear, and free. I opened the window. The scent of climbing roses poured in. The house murmured with leaves, with wind, and with the sound of my own deep breath. I knew, from now on, this home belongs to the one who knows how to keep it. Not just me, but all the women who've been shoved out of the very places they built, just because kindness was mistaken for weakness. I sat down, poured myself an herbal tea, opened my notebook, and wrote, "Today my son called and offered his first apology." I didn't cry, didn't shake, I just smiled, knowing time has finally stood with the steadfast. Peace doesn't come from beating someone, it comes from not losing yourself. Outside, the sun sank behind the Blue Ridge. Orange mixed with purple across the porch roof, bathing the house in quiet color. I went to the yard, set the teapot on the wooden table, and sat alone watching the evening come slowly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel empty. I felt enough. Enough to forgive without forgetting. Enough to love myself again without fearing judgment. Enough to know that even without anyone's approval, I still deserve peace. I looked up and saw a new star appear small and bright. "Thank you, time," I whispered. "Thank you for teaching me that sometimes boundaries are the highest form of love." If you've listened this far, tell me, where are you watching from? Maybe each of us has been Claudia at some point, when kindness is tested, when lines blur, when love and self-respect force us to choose. If this story touched you, leave a comment, tell me what you think, or if you've been through something similar. Every share, every like, every time you hit subscribe doesn't just help me continue this journey, it helps carry the stories of mothers who learn to say no a little farther. Thank you for walking the whole way with me, so that today, in a home full of sunset and roses, I can smile and say, "I'm Claudia Hart, 66 years old, still here, still free. And at last, still at peace."